So in today's video, I wanted to remind everyone of the maladaptive defense mechanisms, just because oftentimes when we consider ourselves Marxists and when we start organizing, we may feel as if we are not going to be affected as much by the capitalist ideology, which to an extent can be true, but we have to still admit to ourselves the influence of the fragments, the capitalist fragments that have appeared in the past 50 years or so, and the way they influence us and the way they can influence our organizing efforts. In the leftist organizing circles, unfortunately, I observe a lot of the same trends that affect everyone because we're people. We're not exempt from falling prey, falling victim to the same patterns of behavior as everyone else does. And it is very naive of us to think that we're going to be exempt just because we read Marx and Engels and Lenin and whatnot. We still have probably gone through different types of trauma, be it childhood trauma or any other kind of developmental trauma, and we are going to necessarily develop maladaptive defense mechanisms in response to the conditions we live under. So we have to continuously undergo this inner work that I continuously promote, because I don't want us to fall prey, to fall victim to the same kind of traps that everybody unfortunately falls into nowadays. So whether we consider ourselves communists or not, we all have to continuously work on understanding ourselves, on learning ourselves concretely, because otherwise we are not going to be very helpful to the movement, we're not going to be very helpful to the rest of the population, and we may fail not only the collective but ourselves as well. The theory of the maladaptive defense mechanisms was developed by Anna Freud, who was Sigmund Freud's daughter. She obviously revised pretty heavily a lot of Freudian concepts. She did spend quite some time with her father in his last years, and this was the time when he actually reviewed many of his findings, many of his conclusions, because he obviously made a ton of mistakes. His framework was still very much progressive for the time being. Obviously, we cannot rely on it because it has too many faults in it. It brings too much harm with its instinctivist approach. It is a very reductionist, mechanistic type of materialism. We can, however, still take whatever is helpful out of his framework, and I think this is what his daughter did. She took what was helpful out of her father's framework, and because of her own experience working with children and early development, she was able to offer a lot of insight into the development of a child's nervous system and of a child's psyche, and upon this she built her theory of maladaptive defense mechanisms. So maladaptive defense mechanisms are a type of behavior patterns that develop in order to protect one's psyche, one's nervous system from harm when certain needs of a child are not met, when they do not feel secure and safe during their early formative years. They begin to develop maladaptive defense mechanisms. They become maladaptive later, actually, when they are just children using these defense mechanisms. They actually serve their purpose, their goal. They defend this child's nervous system from being overwhelmed, from becoming underdeveloped. Children are able to still develop, but kind of haphazardly. Some parts of these children's emotional, for example, support networks may not develop properly. Usually it deals with the emotional side of things, because intellectually most people are still able to develop, even though it may differ. Usually it would affect your emotional intellect. So this is why childhood trauma or developmental trauma causes so much chaos in one's emotional self, in one's emotional expression. So maladaptive defense mechanisms become such later when defense mechanisms are no longer needed for the proper development of this child who becomes a teenager or an adult. But unfortunately, those defense mechanisms remain because it is much more comfortable for our nervous systems not to utilize too many resources to develop new patterns of behavior, because it's not very cost effective to develop new patterns all the time. And these defense mechanisms may remain way into adulthood because the nervous system itself cannot decide to change them. You have to consciously choose to change the way you act, the way you behave, because you see the way it negatively affects you or others or everybody. And this is where I find a lot of us as leftists kind of failing, because we do not address our internal problems. We only focus on the external. We think that, oh, once the economic circumstances change, then everything is going to fall into place, which is true to an extent. I think that we have to put a lot of efforts into changing the internal workings of ourselves together with addressing the rest of the issues. And obviously, as individuals living under the capitalist regimes, we don't really have much agency. We don't even have much say on what's going to happen to us economically. That, of course, does not mean that we should organize in order to strive for such a change. But we have so much more autonomy in our day-to-day lives, in our personal lives. And of course, our personal lives are shaped by our economic circumstances. So again, all of these things are related and interlinked, and it's all dialectical, but I think that this is an issue that is not being properly addressed in a lot of leftist circles, because I observe behaviors among the people who call themselves leftists all the time, the type of behaviors that are harmful to them. And this is not because they're secretly bad individuals. That is because those type of maladaptive defense mechanisms, they appear to protect one's psyche during childhood, but then later they become harmful. And if you're interested in learning what specific maladaptive defense mechanisms Anna Freud suggested, I'm going to include one of her works down below. Most of her works are going to be available publicly, and there are lots of articles written about these defense mechanisms. But generally speaking, when you feel a certain way, your emotions, they need an outlet, right? You need to express your emotions. And oftentimes people misinterpret their emotions and they misattribute their emotions. They think that when they're triggered, they don't notice that, and they start acting upon this trigger. They start acting as if the people around them are the ones who are causing their emotional turmoil, which sometimes is the case. Sometimes other people may cause you a lot of emotional pain, but jumping to this conclusion immediately may be harmful. I'm not advocating for individual responsibility for one's pain at all times, because that is silly and not true, because we're all collectively creating each other's lives, making our lives worse or better. And so did our parents. They made us the way we are. They shaped us together with the rest of the society. They gave us the subjectivity. But now, as adults, we have more agency over these changes. We can now choose to actively participate or not participate in certain harmful practices. And projection, for example, is a very, very common maladaptive defense mechanism. And this is when we are fearful of something within ourselves, or we're insecure about this, and then we project it onto everybody else. We feel like other people are afraid of this. We feel like other people are going to be ashamed of this or insecure about this. And this is a very, very common defense mechanism. And there are so many. There are all types of transference where you are angry with, let's say, your job or with your economic position in society, but you take it upon maybe your family members or your friends or your loved ones or people who are close to you. You may become irate and angry at these people for minuscule reasons. And this, again, this drives communities apart. This drives people apart. This makes us less helpful, less understanding. It makes our vision clouded, quite literally. We become less observant. We are being driven by these impulses to act irrationally, to act upon our emotions. So we let our emotions guide us. We let our emotions shape us. And just as I mentioned before in my video, Are You Perfectly Rational? Oftentimes when people deny the emotional part of themselves, they become emotionally stunted. Their growth emotionally does not really actually happen. So they lack emotional intellect, they lack the ability to understand themselves and others, they lack the ability to connect to others meaningfully because of that. So they become more isolated because of this. And obviously this really harms bigger movements and bigger communities. So I urge everyone to look into the maladaptive defense mechanisms. They kind of became very popular in the modern psychology movements. Of course, there is a lot to criticize there as well, but I think that as a general framework, they're very helpful in one's personal growth. When you understand your emotions better, when you understand the root causes of your emotional distress, then you are going to be able to gain better tools of resolving some of the issues and contradictions that you may observe in your own life. And then you will be able to organize better, because you will be able to meet people where they are. They're not going to drive you up the wall as much, because you will be able to understand them a little bit better. So learn yourself concretely, learn the other people in your community concretely as well, because this is the only way to learn concretely. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you have read anything about this as well. I hope you have a great day today. Consider supporting me on Patreon. Do take care of yourself and your community first, and subscribe to me on all the social medias, even though I don't do much there, and I'll talk to you sometime later.